there's this practice of seeing people around you and thinking there's more and I don't know it all. And I feel like this aspect of reading is often overlooked because we can look at books and think this is for me. And in a way it is because it's growing you, but what it's also giving you is context for something that you don't know.
Welcome to the Rooted Minds podcast, where we come together as a family to seek to understand ourselves and the world a little bit better by talking about literature and about our emotions and about how our brain works. So today, Alyssa's going to be leading us. She has some really interesting thoughts that I'm really excited to get into.
Yeah, so today I wanted to dive into the topic of curiosity and learning to ask better questions through what we've learned from characters in books and things like that.
I love that you're talking about this. I just feel like you're like, of the three of you, like, have always been
so curious.
So curious.
My favorite question as a kid was why?
But why?
And as you can imagine, books would have been just like so delicious to me because I have all of these questions and curiosities about people and the way things work. And so I just ate it all up. And I was just kind of reflecting recently and thinking about how much those books shaped my perspective of the world. Feeling like I've traveled and seen the world and been to many cultures, but I haven't, actually. I've only been out of the country once. And realizing like that books did that for me. And I think there's something so beautiful and valuable to the way that books and learning about people through books can help us in our real life today when we engage with people of another culture or from different experiences than us.
That's so good.
So the first thing I kind of wanted to talk about, honestly, is this. The way I was kind of thinking about it was the surface level trap. Like when you don't know, you don't know.
Why I hate small talk.
So real.
When you're just like, there's absolutely nothing interesting about you.
Say words for the sake of saying words.
That's what it feels like somebody's saying when they can't ever
ask a question or stay, like, what does it look like to stay curious about the person in front of you?
I've had experiences where you're just passing someone, how are you? Fine. How are you? Fine. And you're not really asking.
Yeah.
It's like, what's up? And it's about all it is. So this is good to ask, learning how to ask questions specifically to find out about someone else is so valuable.
I think it's interesting because I feel like just specifically in at least our generation and just like the culture right now, like I feel like we're so learned in the art of, even if it's like somebody's like, how are you? I'm good. You know, like it's just like, it's like almost like a level of learning how to know somebody, but then also learning how to share yourself with people.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
There's a two-way thing there of knowing how to say something more than good.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in that right now. Like, I always try to think, like, somebody asks me how I am, I want to say good or tired. Like, what's a different word I can use? Or at least think about it before I just autopilot reply.
Yeah,
It's
I have people that I'm like, okay, you've got to give me a different adjective because I cannot attune to good. You're good. Awesome.
Great.
Happy for you. You're tired. Oh, that one is better.
Yeah.
I can at least relate to tired.
You can at least like ask why, like they're tired, you know,
why are you
share
tired?
about their week and stuff.
Yeah, and I think that kind of like cap on how much you can know from somebody just by these little interactions can be very limiting or frustrating. Or even like you said, it doesn't feel great when somebody isn't curious about you.
Yeah.
Like when somebody's looking at you and you feel like
they're not even looking at you anymore. They're
not looking at you anymore, or they're acting like they know everything there is to know about you. Like, I know what it feels like to see somebody and talk to them, and then 2 weeks later I find out what they were going through, and I didn't know. And I had this feeling like, oh, I thought we were connecting. Like, I thought I knew, but I wasn't asking. And I thought that I knew everything there was to know about them. And that's the trap, because that's never going to be true.
It's like we make this assumption.
Never going to be true.
We make this assumption that they're just going to tell us. Like, if it's that important, they will just let us know. But sometimes it's hard to know if, sometimes you're going through big stuff, and you don't want to just, like, dump all of that on there, especially if they don't ask.
Yes.
You don't want to, like, blindside them with some, like, crazy thing that just happened to you that's, like, full of emotion that you don't even know if you can hold all in.
Right.
But if they ask...
Yeah.
And part of the problem is, like, we live such busy lives that sometimes we sacrifice curiosity for the sake of, like, more busyness. And so we don't, like, slow down enough to even ask these questions, like sometimes we're the ones who are just moving on, before we stop to listen.
Yeah, that's good.
And we're aware that there's, like, this intricacy to the lives that we're living, and all the details and things, big and small, but we forget that each one of the people around us have the same experience. And I feel like books give us such a good window into remembering that in a way, or having perspective on that, because we are, like, books will describe, like, the diverse, detailed intricacies to another person's life. And
well, it's like you get this insider look into even what they're thinking. So much depth of, like, they're just bearing their soul sometimes.
Exactly.
In stories that you might not get from people.
It's true.
Without a lot of time behind that.
And so your horizons are broadening to what kinds of things you could know about a person.
There's, like, this whole drama, this whole thing behind the person's face that you're looking at, that if you're curious about, I know stuff is going on in you, some good stuff, some hard stuff, whatever, but...
Or even if you've, like, read the book and then watched the movie, sometimes you have that feeling of, oh, but there's so much more there.
Yes.
Because the movie is trying to, like, just show it, whereas the book is, like, using words to describe it.
You can read their thoughts.
You can read their thoughts.
Actually read their thoughts.
And so, like, digging into what are you thinking?
Exactly.
It's so true.
And another thing that books will do as you read those is it will start to exercise the muscle of empathy. So you're starting to understand that there's more that you could have compassion for or empathize with in a person in their life. That as you begin to engage with people around you, you know that there's things to be sensitive to or to connect with them over.
And kind of like the first, like, thing that you gain from, like, reading someone else's thoughts like that is just even, like, recognizing that other people think differently than you think.
That's actually
and they
so
react
true.
differently
That
than you.
is such a good point.
Because I was talking to this one person a while back, and they were telling me, we were talking about this concept actually, which is kind of funny, but they were telling me there's, like, I sometimes forget that, because, like, what I get my head into is everybody acts like me. So if I'm doing good, I'm like, oh, everybody's doing good. But that's not always the case. I mean, it's not the case, because just everybody's different.
The other side too, where you having a terrible day and you kind of weirdly get this impression like everybody's having a bad day.
I'm just curious, and we haven't talked about this at all, so dangerous question. What book do you feel like really, like, sparked this for you? Like, is there a book that you really felt like you connected with that made you go, wow, people live differently?
That's a good question.
That's a good question.
I mean, I can think of a couple, but...
Well, give us what...
I think there's kids' books for sure, but then also, like, other books, like, I think The Cloak of the Light, for some reason, was, like, one of those books that was, like, oh, like, just, like, that is such a different life than, like, I have ever lived, or just even, like, books, like, that Ronald Dahl, like, writes, just, like, these kids, like, fantastical stories of, like, like Matilda, or...
having these, like, very you could say extreme examples of a different way of thinking.
Exactly. Fantastic Mr. Fox, or James and the Giant Peach. Like, all of those books for me are, like,
expanded your creativity, imagination.
Exactly. Yes.
I think for me what I'm thinking about is reading different books like Number the Stars. It gave me like this perspective of what would it look like to live in a wartime. Or Amos Fortune, what would it look like to have this completely different experience than I've ever lived? Or I'm thinking about wartime now, so I'm remembering like The Hiding Place.
Yeah,
like,
that's so
these
good.
very different things. There's also like one thing I was thinking about was like the diary books that I would read as a kid. Like I would literally read somebody's thoughts and emotional processing of their life.
Wow, that's so interesting.
That's crazy.
I read this one that was called Remember the Alamo, and it was about this little girl who was traveling. And I read,
That's crazy.
there was this one, I can't remember what it was called, but it was about this. It was like a medieval times, this little boy who was, I don't know, like assisting a knight, and what he lived through and what that looked like. Just these kinds of, like, I'm getting into the headspace of somebody who has nothing in common with me.
First one I thought of, well, a couple of them. One was The Chosen, called The Chosen, by Kame Patak or something like that. I forget how to say his name, but two Jewish boys from totally different sects that, like, I'd never lived in that. And that was, like, totally eye-opening.
Wow.
And also 100 Cupboards, where this little boy named Henry lives in a town named Henry, and it's such a small town. Like, that's just a different life. And then his, of course, all of his adventures and how he emotionally sort of dealt with that. And it was really good for me to see
That's
that.
really
good.
fun.
That's good.
What about
And
you?
what I thought about was, first of all, there was this book series that I used to read when I was a kid called The Mysterious Benedict Society. And that the premise of the story was it was like following these 4 kids who were very, very different from each other, and they interacted and reacted to things so differently from each other.
That's so
and
true.
so I was kind of thinking about that one. But also, we just read so many like missionary biographies growing up, and every single one of those, I think it's cool to be able to see how every single person thinks and responds so differently from each other. Not to mention they're in like completely different parts of the world, but it's cool that like they all have the same mission in a sense. You know, they're all like going out to like advance the gospel, but they're doing it in such different ways, you know,
Unique ways.
and God is showing up for them in different ways, you know, like God doesn't even respond to them the same way either, because they're different people.
It's so true.
And different needs, different cultures, different,
I think a couple that stood out for me were like Anne of Green Gables. I mean, partly because the scope of imagination that she has.
It's so
Like,
true.
but she's like this orphan that gets into this like
That's true.
place that they wanted a boy and she's a girl, and she does everything wrong. Not because she's doing it wrong, but because she's just so unexpected.
Right.
So it's like her like interacting with this whole other culture that she comes in. But it's beautiful watching how like they receive her and learn from her in that. But also Black Beauty was
Oh, that's a good
the
one.
one that was just so interesting because it's from the horse's perspective.
Yeah.
And it just like
horse.
POV horse. Like it just makes you think about like things that you felt were like just normal. That's what a horse does. But like it challenges your thinking on even what do you think certain types of people are. Well, that's just a cashier. That's just
the assumption.
Right. But there's a whole story behind all of those people, all of their thoughts and all their experiences are of value.
That's such a good point. Like, there's this practice of seeing people around you and thinking there's more and I don't know it all. And I feel like this aspect of reading is often overlooked because we can look at books and think this is for me. And in a way it is because it's growing you, but what it's also giving you is context for something that you don't know. Like my dad always said, there's a circle of what you know you don't know. And the rest of the expanse of eternity is what you don't know you don't know.
That's a lot of stuff you don't
A
know.
tiny little dot in the center, that's what you know. And as we learn and we grow, we learn that there's more that we don't know.
Yeah.
And I think there's such a beautiful thing about getting different perspectives and knowing that people think differently in the books that we read, and there's different cultures that we can begin to engage with as we read books that people have different experiences in.
And even as someone, I was thinking the other day how, somebody who is in a field like, I don't know, and he's in the law field, for example, or a medical field or something like that. That's a whole nother world in itself too. And
That's right.
They're coming from a whole different perspective. And so being curious about that perspective is it's similar at least, as finding out about a person's perspective and background from a place that they lived.
Right.
Too.
And like as we get more context for the things that are new to us or different from us, we start to develop better questions to ask.
That's good.
Like moving beyond like where are you from or how are you? Like where are you from is a good place to start, but how do you get deeper and how do you learn more about the person and open up a safe space for conversation?
It's almost like reading this literature helps us with those questions because you've seen something different. That sounds familiar. You don't have to say the book, but it's like, do you do something like this, or is it kind of like this? And you're in your mind, you're thinking about that book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry. The truth is, like, the Bible is just so relational, that it's just such a like biblical priority to want to seek out relationships with people. And so like when we come from that point, then we can we see all these people and we want to ask better questions because we want to grow a relationship with them actually. And not just for the sake of like asking the questions and like getting new information, but for the sake of like actually like growing in a relationship. Like you care.
Well, I've heard it said something about like reading is like growing your ability to listen.
Ooh.
Because if you submit yourself to reading a book, then you're like saying, okay, I'm going to shut my mouth and receive your perspective.
Yeah.
Wow.
Not saying that I'm going to like accept it all, because that's not realistic or healthy. To say, oh, you're only speaking truth all the time. But just to listen to their perspective and try to see it from their eyes, from their viewpoint, not trying to say, but how does that relate to me?
Right.
But it cultivates this listening thing, which if you listen long enough, you actually could get curious.
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute, what does that look like?
It's
I've never heard of that before.
Your circle's expanding. You're like, I didn't know that.
Oh, you work at a law firm. That's cool. What does that look like for you? Because there's so many different experiences in a law firm.
Exactly.
Not my one experience of one person that I know that worked in a law firm or my...
Yeah.
And it can be tempting to like stick to the things you know, to just read like what you like or what's familiar to you or in your world. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think there's such a beauty and value to reading things that are from different authors than your experience or about different topics than what you know. And just giving it a chance to listen. Like you're saying, I loved this. Every person carries a universe of experiences within them, and our job is to be curious enough to discover it.
That's so good.
I think it says in Proverbs that God is a God that loves to, it's his glory to conceal a matter, and it's the glory of kings to search it out. And I think we are creative beings that were designed to discover.
Wow.
He's just placed layers of beauty in everything that he's made. And I think we, like people, we're just made to discover things about each other. If not, we would have all been the same.
That's
and
good.
so, like, there's just something so beautiful to the way books just feed and grow that God-given pathway.
I love that. Well, thank you for joining us again on our podcast. And we'll be putting the books that we recommended and those things in the show notes.
Yes.
And we just encourage you to share your books and authors that have expanded your horizons.
Yes.
Because we continually love, even though we've read a lot, we love to hear more recommendations.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just become more curious. Try to challenge yourself this week to ask better questions in conversations and listen like you would listen to a book.
Ooh.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks again for joining us today on the Rooted Minds podcast. If you enjoyed our discussion on curiosity, consider joining our learning community. Alyssa goes deeper there into creativity and faith, what it means to be a son and a daughter of a creative God, and I think you'd enjoy it. But until next time, may you find joy, grace, and peace in the pages you turn.